Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here. We have a very important video for you today talking specifically about the Waking Flame DLC and Update 31 coming to the Elder Scrolls Online. And even though this is just a dungeon DLC, it's not a brand new chapter, there are still a lot of updates going through the base game, including new sets and set changes. We've got changes to skills, champion points, passives, and a lot more. So that's why I made this video. I've got everything in one place. These are the top 5 things you need to know to get ready for the Waking Flame DLC and Update 31. Alright, let's start with the new DLC dungeons and the new sets, which of course is a big deal. The 2 new dungeons are called Red Petal Bastion and the Dread Cellar. And honestly, the sets that are available in these dungeons are actually quite good. Let's actually start with the monster sets. We've got Prior Theoric's Mask. This is from Red Petal Bastion. It gives you weapon and spell damage, plus enemies take AoE physical damage, and it does increase their damage taken from your AoE effect abilities by 5%. The medium set from this dungeon is pretty interesting as well. Grizzly Gourmet creates a sweet roll next to your target for 5 seconds. If you or an ally touches the sweet roll, you gain a random effect, either bonus health, stamina, and magicka, empower for 10 seconds, or major force for 10 seconds. You can technically stack multiple of these at the same time, which is pretty cool. The other dungeon is called the Dread Cellar. I really like the monster mask from this dungeon as well. Magma Incarnate gives you both magicka and stamina recovery. That's pretty good. Plus, you can give you and your group both minor courage and minor resolve at the same time. The light armor set from this dungeon called Scorion's Feast looks particularly good as well. You get magicka recovery, weapon and spell damage, and then the bonus for your group, either 300 plus magicka and stamina recovery or 300 plus damage. The heavy armor set I think is going to be quite useful as well. Crimson Oath sends out a shockwave, reducing the armor of nearby enemies by about 3,500 for 15 seconds with a 12-second cooldown. And there's also Rush of Agony, which is the medium armor set. This deals physical damage to all enemies within range, pulls them to you, and does not apply CC immunity. Pretty interesting idea. Now keep in mind there are more new sets this patch. These were added to the rewards for the worthy PvP rewards, and these are brand new as well. 3 new sets. For example, you have the Dark Convergence set. This is a light armor PvP set. This creates a 60% snare, pulls enemies every 2 seconds, stuns them, deals magic damage, with more damage dealt if you have more enemies in the area. And you'll see a lot of these new PvP sets are very Zerg busting focused. Some older sets this patch got a refresh as well. Things like Pelinal's Aptitude and Crusader have a completely different look, so make sure to check those out as well. I have a list of updated sets over at hacktheminotaur.com, so if you want to see more, make sure to check out our Waking Flame DLC guide. I'll have a link for that in the description. Up next, let's talk about champion points. Now, there are several new CP nodes getting added in Update 31. Most of them are in the fitness tree in the red constellation, and most of them are actually coming in as sub-constellations. Now, if you remember back to when the system was updated for CP 2.0, remember the developers talked about they eventually wanted to add more of these sub-constellations over time to give us more options in the champion point system. They have done that now in the red tree with these 3 sub-constellations. So over where we used to have Mystic Tenacity, this is now called Survivor's Spite. Where Hasty was previously, this is called Wind Chaser. And where I believe Nimble Protector was the only star, now we have Walking Fortress. So let's go ahead and start there. Actually, Walking Fortress has more to do with blocking and damage shields. Here's Nimble Protector, increases your movement speed while bracing. That hasn't changed. But now we have some additional new slotted stars. Ward Master reduces your damage taken while blocking and under the effects of a damage shield. Bracing Anchor, while in combat, increase the amount of damage you can block, but reduces your movement speed. And then Soothing Shield, when you successfully block an attack, you have a 15% chance to restore health. So that's Walking Fortress. Then we have Wind Chaser. These are going to be more centered around mobility. Here's where we have Hasty, of course. You'll still probably want to pick this up. But then you have these additional options. Thrill of the Hunt. I actually like this one quite a bit. Whenever you kill an enemy, gain Major Expedition for 3 seconds per stage. Increases your movement speed by 30%. So that'll go up to 6 seconds for each kill once you have that maxed out. Then we have Refreshing Stride. When sprinting, gain 100 health and Magicka recovery per stage. So up to 500 health and 500 Magicka recovery while sprinting. That seems pretty strong. And then Celerity increases your movement speed by 2% per stage. And this is all the time, by the way. This isn't just in combat. So that's an extra 10% movement speed that's going to stack with all of your other movement speed buffs all the time. Finally, we have Survivor's Spite over where Mystic Tenacity was. This is adding 3 more slotted stars. Pain's Refuge reduces the damage taken by 1% per negative effect on you, up to a maximum of 20%. So 20% damage reduction. Then you have Relentlessness. Being stunned or feared causes you to gain major protection for 3 seconds. And Sustained by Suffering increases your health, magicka, and stamina recovery. See what that looks like at max rank. 150 magicka, health, and stamina recovery. Now, this brings me to another change in the red tree, and that is that this is now the maximum recovery you're going to be able to get from the red tree. That's because they did change Rejuvenation. Rejuvenation saw a bit of a nerf in Update 31. This is now just 90 health, magicka, and stamina recovery, so keep that in mind. You can change that out for Sustained by Suffering, but again, you need to have a negative status effect on you to get the full recovery of that one. Finally, you might notice that this previous star was called Ironclad. It's now called Fortified, and the reason for that is when we go into the blue tree, we actually have a new slotted star in the blue tree as well on the defensive sub-constellation here, Staving Death. Ironclad has moved over here, but this now reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 2% per stage, so up to 10% maximum on that one. That's all we have as far as CP changes. Again, most of these are happening in the red tree with these new sub-constellations, giving you more options on the defensive and the survivability side of things. All right, let's switch gears on our list here and talk about skills. A lot of interesting changes actually coming in the Waking Flame DLC when it comes to skills and passives in this game. Now for this part of our list, I want to talk mostly about some solo abilities, things that should help players a lot when it comes to survivability. Let's actually start with some weapon skills. So I'm going to go to the two-handed skill line and Brawler. Now Brawler is the usual skill, the usual morph of Cleave that most people take. They usually take Brawler for a solo build, because you get the damage shield, right? And the damage shield can be quite strong. It can scale up based on the amount of enemies hit. Now, what they're changing in the Waking Flame DLC is they're actually giving the damage shield to Carve, to the other morph as well. So both Carve and Brawler have the same base damage shield. You can see here on my Stamina Sorcerer, I have about a 5k damage shield for 6 seconds on Brawler, 5k damage shield for 6 seconds on Carve. Now, Brawler, of course, is still the best defensive morph because that damage shield will stack. The more enemies I hit, the more damage shield stacks I get. Carve just has the 1 damage shield, but still, it's better than nothing. And I'm not fully buffed on this character, so this can easily hit 6, 7k damage shield, no problem. Now, they've also increased the damage of Carve, which is quite nice as well. You can see the bleed effect now stacks up to 3 times. So you can have 3 bleeds from Carve. That's pretty impressive. And then, of course, you also get the damage shield. So I think a lot of players may consider Carve now moving into Update 31. If you have like a two-handed solo build, definitely check it out. Play around with the morph of Carve. I think it's going to be viable now. Now, the other buff we have is in the dual wield skill line, specifically on the Flurry skill. Flurry is that channeled ability that does damage, physical damage. The final hit deals more damage. Now, if we look at the 2 morphs here, Rapid Strikes has not changed. This still gives us an increased damage on each subsequent hit. That's fine. But then when we look at Bloodthirst, Bloodthirst now has more healing. Specifically, the bleed damage heals you for 30% of the damage caused. That's on each hit. I believe it used to be just maybe the final hit that gave you the heal. I don't remember exactly, but now this is giving us much more healing. Every strike of Bloodthirst healing us for 30% back. That's actually very similar to like Templar Puncturing Sweeps. Sweeps, I think, heals you for like 33%. Actually, if I morph this, it probably is more. Yeah, 33% healing done based on our damage. So this is going to be a really good option now. I mean, it already was a strong option, but it's going to be stronger than ever for stamina builds. So if you are starting out, if you're a newer player, pick up dual wield Bloodthirst. This is going to be a great morph for your DPS. And then if you want to solo more difficult content, you might want to think about this as well on the solo build. And then one more thing, something new for damage, since we're talking about increasing the damage of our build. Let's jump into guild skills and look specifically at Undaunted and Inner Fire. So this is an interesting skill you might not think of when dealing damage. Actually, we need to look at the morphs for this. So Inner Fire is basically a ranged taunt that costs magicka. Inner Rage, this morph is still a taunt, still does magic damage, and it has a synergy. But when we look at the stamina morph called Inner Beast, let me just take this. The enemy takes 10% more damage from your attacks while this effect persists if they are not a player. Okay, so this did see a sizable buff. Actually, at the beginning of the PTS cycle, I think it was up to like 15% bonus damage, and you could use it on players as well, so it was pretty busted. Now it's been reduced to 10%, but that's still a pretty strong buff for solo play. Remember, this is not a major or minor buff, so this stacks with things like Major Berserk, Minor Berserk. You can still use all of those in combination with Inner Beast. Now, why do I say mostly with a solo build? Well, this is still a taunt, so you're not going to be wanting to run this in a group if you're not the main tank. But for things like solo play, or even if you have a companion, if you want to tank for your companion so they don't die right away, this is going to be a nice option because it does give you a 10% damage boost. So definitely consider that one. Now let's talk a little bit more about defensive options that were added in Waking Flame as well. This one is going to be under Alliance War and the support skill line, and it is Revealing Flare. Now, Revealing Flare is still pretty much a PvP-oriented skill. This exposes stealth and hidden enemies, but now it gets a nice passive buff. You can see there at the bottom. While slotted, you gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 10%. Now, you don't even have to morph this to get the major protection, the 10%. You can just throw that on your bar, which I should probably put it on my front bar. That makes more sense. You can just throw that on my front bar, and now I have passively 10% damage reduction all the time. You don't even have to cast this ability. So this is quite nice. Keep in mind, too, you also get the magicka aid from the support skill line. So now I also have 10% magicka recovery with that Revealing Flare slotted. So yeah, if you have room on your bar for some extra damage mitigation and for some extra recovery, definitely might want to check that out. And then one more defensive skill that got reworked this patch. This is going to be in Guild Skills Psijic Order. Now this applies mostly to Meditate. If you're not familiar with this skill, Meditate is a channel that you throw on. And while you're using the channel, you have increased health, stamina, and magicka every 1 second. Pretty cool ability to have in certain situations. The extra healing, the extra magicka and stamina sustain is definitely nice. Now, where it got buffed is actually in the passives for the Psijic Order skill line. If we go down to Deliberation, this used to give us passive major protection. That's that 10% damage reduction that we talked about with Revealing Flare. It used to be 30% at max. That was when it was a very powerful buff, and then they decided to nerf it down to 10%. This passive was obviously 10% damage reduction then, but now it's no longer major protection. So this is now its own unique damage reduction buff, and it's massive, you guys. 30% damage reduction while you're channeling any of these Psijic Order abilities. And the most obvious one, I think, is Meditate. So while I'm channeling that Meditate skill, not only am I getting all my resources back, but I'm taking 30% less damage. So this is going to be really nice now. It was already a powerful ability in both PvE and PvP. Now I think you're going to see people using it a lot more. So just keep that in mind. You might consider using it as well. But there you go. Quite a lot of powerful buffs getting added to the game. All right, our next major change has to do with skills as well. But this one I thought would be best to separate because it is a pretty major change on its own. And that has to do with ice damage and specifically frost builds, frost tanks, and frost DPS. I think both of those type of builds are now going to be stronger than ever thanks to some of the changes coming out in the Waking Flame DLC. So let's jump into Destruction Staff and see what is different. Now, the first thing that they did is going to be very good if you want to be an Ice Mage, if you want to do a DPS build as Frost Staff front bar, then this can be done now using Destructive Reach. This actually got a significant buff in its overall damage. Actually, let me look at the Frost Reach tooltip. So this is unbuffed, obviously, but it's dealing 5,800 frost damage plus the additional frost damage over time. Enemies hit are also guaranteed to receive the chilled status effect. So the status effect is nice as well. But when you compare this to another DPS skill, the cost is going to be the same. So here's 2,700 Magicka. When you compare this to Force Pulse, it's also 2,700 Magicka. Range is still the same. Force Pulse actually is doing less damage now. It's doing about 300 less damage when you compare it to the actual damage of Frost Reach. So if you're playing on like maybe a Warden where you have additional buffs to frost damage, it's going to be quite nice. You get the Minor Maim, you get Minor Brittle thrown into this, and it becomes a pretty nice Frost DPS spammable skill. Now, like I said, that is not all. If you are interested in Frost tanking, that got some buffs as well. Let me go ahead and respec this. So Frost Clench is still a taunt. It still has the 15-meter range. It still costs Magicka. I believe it got a cost reduction as well. 1485 Magicka is really low cost. But check out the additional buffs here. First of all, it is also guaranteed to apply chilled status effect, which is really great for tanks to be able to apply as well. It's going to immobilize the enemy and inflict major maim for 5 seconds. So that's not minor maim, that's major maim, reducing their damage done by 10%. Now remember, you also get minor maim from the chilled status effect. You also get the increased crit damage. So you're able to apply a lot of debuffs now, plus obviously taunt the boss with that ability. So there you can see the 3 debuffs: minor maim, major maim, minor brittle, and the taunt effect. Pretty nice. So if you like the Frost builds in ESO, again, either a Frost tank or you want to be a Frost DPS, check out the Frost Staff. It is getting some very nice buffs this patch. All right, and the last major change on our list, and in my opinion, the biggest change, is going to be what is happening to armor passives in ESO. Now, I did release a full video explanation on this, as well as a written guide. That's going to be in the description if you want to check that out. But just briefly, in case you missed it, here's what's going on with armor skills and how this potentially is going to change your build. First, in light armor, the 2 passives at the bottom here, Prodigy and Concentration, are now considered to be hybrid passives. That means they buff both stamina and magicka builds equally. You can see Prodigy now gives you weapon and spell crit rating, 219 per piece of light armor equipped. And then Concentration gives you both physical and spell penetration, 939 for each piece of light armor equipped. Now this is pretty interesting. A few of these buffs that we'll see, like for example, physical penetration, you were never able to get that before in the game from an armor passive. That's now part of the light armor skill line. So potentially, stamina builds could run a piece or 2 of light armor and get some other bonuses. You can get crit chance and you can get physical penetration. Now you may want to consider that even more when you see how medium armor has changed. Specifically, the dexterity passive has been completely redone. It no longer gives you weapon critical, it gives overall crit damage and crit healing. So that applies to both magicka and stamina builds. Yes, on medium armor. So again, what ZOS is going for is more of a hybridized approach where you might consider wearing different pieces from your main armor set. And then the other one here as well, Agility now gives you weapon and spell damage for each piece of medium armor worn. I think this change is going to have the biggest impact on hybrids, where you're going to have the option to get more stats than you've had in the past. What I'm currently testing out on my hybrid builds is wearing 3 pieces of light, 3 pieces of medium, 1 piece of heavy. This is useful because I can get all of these stats, right? I can get weapon and spell crit chance, physical and spell penetration. I can get weapon and spell damage and crit damage and crit healing. That's a lot of stats that I can get overall. Plus, if I'm wearing multiple armor types, I get more max stats from the Undaunted guild passive called Undaunted Metal. I can get up to 6% bonus stats that way from wearing all different types of armor. This will have some effect on things like stamina DPS and magicka DPS builds. I think it's going to open up some more options for you, but you will need to change a few things in order to maintain similar DPS numbers. I talk about that more in the other video. Again, check out the link for that if you're interested. But there you go. Those are the 5 major changes coming to the Elder Scrolls Online in the Waking Flame DLC, also Update 31. Let me know what you all think about these changes down in the comments section below. Which of these is going to have the most impact on your build and why? I'd definitely be curious to know what you all think about this moving forward into ESO. As always, if you enjoyed the video today or you found it informative, don't forget to crush that like button. If you really liked it and you want to see more ESO content, make sure you're subscribed right here for many more guides, builds, and ESO news just like this. And thank you all so much for watching. I will see you around in the next video.